Hey besties, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a July reading wrap up. I hope you guys don't mind the kind of atmosphere I've got going on. It's like really rainy and stormy outside, and so it's very just like dark in general. But I've kind of tried to set the mood. I had my candle going before, but it was showing up weird on the camera, so I turned it off. But anyway, I hope you guys, grab something to snack on, grab a little drink, we'll chat about some books. It's going to be a great time. Quickly, before we get into the books that I read in July, I wanted to do a quick little book haul. This is something that my friend Paris does on her channel, which I think is really, really great because I don't usually buy a lot of books. But I mean, as you can see, I have a decent little stack here. The end of July came around and I kind of just slipped. Accidentally bought a bunch of books. I have a few more coming as well, which I will do a mini haul of in my August wrap up probably, but I don't usually buy a lot of books physically, so I'm super excited to share these with you guys. The first book that I want to share with you is actually a book that I got in June, and I did buy it for video, so you guys will be seeing me talk about it sometime soon. But this is a short story collection, and the cover is just like so beautiful. I love how shiny it is, minimal, stunning, and this is Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. I'm pretty sure in this short story collection is the story called Arrival, I think, or this might just be his other stories, but Arrival is a short story which was turned into a movie, which is really, really cool. It's about aliens that come to Earth and there's a translator and they basically try to communicate with these aliens. Really good movie if you haven't seen it. I had no idea that it was based on a short story. My boyfriend picked this out for me. He realized that this was the guy who wrote the short story and he wanted me to try read some of his other stories. So this is going to be really interesting. You'll see this coming up in a video probably sometime in August. Okay, the next book that I bought, I think it's the next one I want to talk about, is 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This is a romance, which was very shocked to see that we had in bookstores in New Zealand because we don't usually have new release romances. I have heard so many people talking about this. There was one day last week, I think it was Thursday, where I was on TikTok and I genuinely saw about 10 separate TikToks all in a row from different people talking about this book, sharing their favorite lines, basically just raving about it. Looked it up, saw that we had it in store in New Zealand. I was absolutely shocked, knew I had to go and get it, went and got it the next day. Technically, I've started reading this on my Goodreads. It's on my currently reading because I read the first page when I bought it, but I haven't actually started it. But basically, from what I can tell, this follows two writers who used to be together, have been apart for a really long time, and then meet up again. We follow them spending those 7 days together. It's just meant to be a really, really great romance. Super excited to get this. The cover also is stunning. I love the blue and the pink with the red on the spine. Beautiful. The next two books I got, we'll do the next romance. I got this book called Ghosts by Dolly Alderton, and I'm pretty sure this is a romance. It follows Nina, who's in her 30s, and seems she's just not living, loving, laughing with life. So she kind of wants things to change, and apparently she meets a man who, on the first date, tells her that he's going to marry her. Seems that everything kind of kicks off from there. I wasn't really sure about picking this up, but then I saw on the back that Stanley Tucci said that this was a stunning achievement, so moving, so funny, so beautifully written, and so poignant, brilliant. So got this, excited to read it, excited to give it a go. I love the kind of pastel cover we've got going on. At the same time, I also went and bought The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I'm probably saying his last name wrong, I'm so sorry. This is like a murder mystery sort of vibe. I've heard a lot of talk about this, a lot of hype, so very interested to see what this is like. I haven't read his other book, The Silent Patient, but interested to read this. It kind of gives me like the Secret History vibes. I mean, I don't know if that is the case, but just the cover, the kind of, I'm pretty sure it's, is it set at a university? I thought it was, but it might not be. Yeah, no, it's set at St. Christopher's College in Cambridge, and it's about a secret society. I'm pretty sure there is like a murdery mystery aspect to this, and that's very similar to The Secret History. I love The Secret History, so hoping that I enjoy this. And then I ordered 3 books online. Again, I was kind of just shocked that we had some of these available. The first one is a book that I've been wanting to read for a really long time since it came out, Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. I have one of his other books, And he also wrote Never Let Me Go, which is one of the saddest movies I've ever seen in my life. I haven't read the book, but the movie makes me cry every time without fail. I've only watched it like 3 times because it's genuinely too upsetting to watch too often. But if he created that, I genuinely think that he must be a genius. So super excited to read this. I'm pretty sure this is about artificial intelligence, and I'm pretty sure someone has like an AI friend. Something to do with being lonely and finding friends in robots. That's all I know about this. Then I got another kind of new release which I'm really excited for, and that's Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. It follows a family of rich people, siblings I think, and they throw this huge party in the summer. And the story, from what I can tell, follows that one night, and apparently it ends in a huge house fire. And so I'm assuming we follow all of the events that take place up until the fire at the end. This very much gives me We Were Liars vibes by E. Lockhart. If you've read We Were Liars, it's like a YA mystery. It follows a group of rich people in the summer, rich families in the summer. They go to this little island, they throw lots of parties. It's kind of a murder mystery vibe, very similar to this. It seems like this is just going to be like the adult version of that. I read We Were Liars years ago when I was in high school, when I was like 15. Really loved it, so I'm hoping that I will really like this as well. And then the last book I bought was one that I've already read, but I was just super excited to own a physical copy. And that is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. This is a Hades and Persephone new adult romance retelling. So in this universe, the gods are real, but they don't live on Mount Olympus. I don't know if that's how it goes in the Greek mythology, but basically Persephone is studying journalism at university. She's kind of trying to live a normal life, but her mother is super overbearing and protective. One night, her friend convinces her to go out to this really exclusive club. She gets tickets, drags Persephone along with her. That's where she meets Hades for the first time. He owns the club, so he's not only the god of the underworld. The underworld does exist in this universe, we see it later, but he owns like a lot of the nightclubs in this town. I don't know what the name of the town is, but basically he just kind of runs the nightlife there. That starts their relationship. This is just like a fun Persephone Hades retelling, flirty new adult romance. I can't wait to get the other books in the series as well. But that is my little book haul for July. Super excited to own all of these. And as I said, I have a few other books coming in the mail, but they won't arrive well into August, so we'll talk about those another time. I just realized I don't have... Where's the book where I keep all my books? Hang on. But on to the wrap-up part of this video. Let's talk about all of the books that I read in July. It turns out I read 22 books in July. I don't know how that happened, but I did. And usually when I do wrap-ups, I just talk about all the books that I read in like a chronological order, but I don't think that's gonna work in July, because over July I was participating in the historical romance readathon. So I read a bunch of historical romances over the course of July for that specific readathon. I vlogged for that readathon as well. I think I did like weekly vlogs. So those were 9 of the 22 books that I read. Not gonna really talk about those. I also want to mention 2 books that I didn't end up giving ratings because they were just short kind of romance erotica books that I read. I think they were both new releases, they might not be, but basically I read Forbidden Fling and Stalked by the Kraken. If you want to, I think I'm pretty sure I wrote like mini reviews of those on my Goodreads, so I'll leave a link to my Goodreads down below as well if you want to go check my reviews out for those, but I didn't end up rating them. I might have given them star ratings on Goodreads, like just an average 3 stars. I kind of just filled in an hour of my day. Actually, I also read another short romance called Truth or Dare. I did rate this one. I rated this 3 stars because it was a little bit longer than the other 2. I did really quite like this. Again, still too short to be kind of like as good as a full-length romance novel in my opinion, but this was definitely fun and steamy. I would rate this. If you're looking for something just short and fun and flirty, pick this up. Actually, also kind of, there was another short sort of romance called Hollywood Roommates, which is available on Kindle Unlimited. So is Truth or Dare, I'm pretty sure. And this was just pure fun escapism. I think I gave this 3 stars. Reverse harem, basically. an English teacher gets kicked out of her home she gets broken up with, so she has to find some place to stay. Her best friend says, hey, go live with my brother, he has a spare room. Turns out her brother is like a famous actor, and he lives with two other really hot famous actors, and they kind of just all get into a bit of a fling, but then that fling turns into something a little bit more serious. It's just pure fun escapism if you're looking for something like that. And then I'm pretty sure out of the rest of the books I have to talk about, only one of them was a fantasy, so let's talk about that first. If you watched my plan with me video where I sat down and planned out my TBR for July, I intended on participating in the Path or Pantheon readathon in July. Didn't really end up actually taking part in that, but I did read one of the books of my TBR, which was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This was really great, honestly. I haven't read a really, hard fantasy like this in a while. I gave this 4 stars because it was kind of difficult for me to get through. I really have not struggled to get through a book in so long, so that was definitely a weird feeling. I think it took me like a week to read this book, which is essentially unheard of. I usually read books in like 1 or 2 days. So honestly, it was like a little bit refreshing that I had a book that actually took some time to read, but I could also see why people wouldn't like that, because this is a very slow fantasy. It is very dense with fantasy, information, names, places, all that sort of stuff. It is written in a very kind of whimsical fairy tale like style, so if you're into that, definitely would recommend picking it up. This was just like very interesting as well. Basically, the evil force in this story are trees. There's like an evil forest, and I love that idea so much. I think in my review on Goodreads I said that this was like dark cottagecore propaganda. Basically, we follow our main character who gets taken by this wizard, and she essentially finds out that she can do magic, and he has taken her because he wants to train her up, right? Honestly, that part of the book takes a lot longer than I think it really needed to, but basically from there, shenanigans ensue. We learn more about this evil force of the forest that is slowly taking over the land and is an active force of evil. Like, it is trying to hurt and kill people. And it was just like, while the book was a bit of a drag, if we're being honest, there's a lot that you have to get through. The end, the reveal of like everything was so interesting. I absolutely loved the ending, learning about the origins of the forest, learning about, the actual, I guess, reason behind the war that's going on between everyone and everything. And I just really love the fact that the forest was evil. I kind of really like just vague, magical, evil things, forces in fantasy books. I think that is super fun and not really done a lot in fantasy these days. I feel like that's not really what happens. This isn't a character-driven story. It's barely like a plot-driven story either. Honestly, it is. I could see a lot of people not liking this, but it was a very refreshing fantasy for me to read personally. I had a great time. Gave this 4 stars. I was very impressed. And then every other book that I read in July was a romance. So if you're looking for some romance recommendations, you have come to the right place, because I read so many good romances in July. I'm meaning so many good ones, some new favorites. Was so happy with my reading in July. Let's just get right into it. 2 books that I have read before that I reread in July, Punk 57 and Birthday Girl. These are both kind of dark, taboo romances. Punk 57 specifically is a bully romance. The first time I read this, I think I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a little bit overhyped. This time around, something about it just hit perfectly for me. I absolutely loved the story so much. I bumped my rating up to 5 stars. And I think the same thing happened with Birthday Girl as well. Birthday Girl is a boyfriend's dad romance. So this is a bit of an age gap. No cheating happens. Want to very specifically say no cheating happens. I'm really not fussed about the age gap, if I'm being honest. I could see why a lot of other people wouldn't like it, and that is totally fine, but this was really good this time around as well. Something about it. I think every time I reread a Penelope Douglas book, I like it more. So those were both really great. Had an incredible time rereading those. A romance that I've been wanting to read for a really long time, finally got my hands on, was Lover Unveiled. This is the newest book in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, which is a paranormal romance vampire series. I think this is book 19, maybe book 20. I read all of the other books in the series last year. I've been waiting for so long for this one to come out. It came out in April, but I only just managed to pick it up. And I mean, I didn't love it that much, which kind of sucks. Mainly, I just didn't really like the characters, specifically the romance. I liked our hero, Savage. Don't even comment about the names. If you haven't read the series, I know it sounds ridiculous, but oh my god, okay, just don't comment. I liked Savage, he was interesting, but both him and our main character, her name was Karen. I think her name was literally Karen. It might not be, but I think it was. And both of them were just kind of a bit too miserable, which sounds ridiculous, but it was just so frustrating to see them interact with each other, both of them trying to be so self-sacrificing for the other one. I just didn't really care. What I did care about though is the plot. I am so invested in this stupid fucking smutty romance vampire plot. It is insane. I love the world building of this series. At this point, I'm sticking to find out like what happens plot wise. I'm not really so much caught up in the romance. I mean, I do like the romance aspect to them, obviously, but the plot just keeps getting better and better and more interesting, and I'm so here for it. Very excited for the next book to see where the plot goes. Don't really want to say too much about this though, obviously, because it's the most recent book in this really long series. So anyway, another new release, which was also another Penelope Douglas book that I read in July, was Trist 6 Venom. I did a whole reading vlog for this, so if you want to go watch that, you totally can. This was one of my most anticipated releases for 2021. It did not disappoint. I gave this 5 stars. I knew I could rely on Penelope Douglas to bring some good, steamy, sapphic romance. This basically follows 2 high school students, Clay and Olivia. They're both from separate sides of the tracks in their hometown. So Clay comes from like a rich family, the rich side of town. Olivia lives with her brothers. I don't think she's the youngest. She might be the youngest, but her parents died when she was very young, so basically she's just grown up with her brothers, right? She is in the high school that her and Clay both go to on a scholarship. Clay kind of makes Olivia's life a living hell. They're both on like the same sports team, they're in some of the same classes. Clay is always just tormenting Olivia, but it's just because that she's obsessed with her and she doesn't know how to deal with it. And oh my gosh, this was the most angsty romance I have read in so long, and it was just exactly what I needed to read. I am actually waiting for a physical copy to arrive so I can reread it, because there are definitely some triggering topics that happen, and this isn't like the best romance. All of Penelope Douglas's books are kind of dark and taboo and fucked up in a way, and there are definitely some things that happen in this book that lots of people would definitely not like, and lots of people would, you know, say totally toxic. How can you get behind this relationship? Which I totally get. This book is not without its faults, but I still really loved it. I have been waiting for a Penelope Douglas sapphic romance. I called it when I read her Devil's Night series last year. I vlogged that as well. I knew as soon as I was reading that series that she was going to have to write a sapphic romance at some point. I hope she writes other sapphic romances as well. I hope this isn't just the only sapphic romance that we get from Penelope Douglas, because this was really, really great. And I think she could bring so much more to the genre as well. Like, no one does romance like her. So I want more sapphic romance from her. Another romance that I read, which wasn't really standout, but I want to talk about before I get to the last 3 books that I read in July. This was Out on Good Behavior. I think it's the 3rd book in a romance series. It's a new adult romance, and I read this because it is a sapphic romance, but the main character in this book is pansexual. And for anyone who doesn't know, I'm pansexual, and you don't really get a lot of pansexual representation in books. So I heard that this had a pansexual main character, was really excited to pick it up and just see what that was like. And it was really refreshing to read a main character who was pansexual, because like, relatable. I definitely wanted just a little bit more from this romance though, plot-wise, as well as theme-wise, as well as character-wise. I think the character development could have been a little bit better, but overall this was very, very sweet, and I mean, it was a fun, enjoyable read. And I think this is indie published, so if you're looking for something that is a little bit diverse and indie published, would recommend picking this up. It was pretty decent. Again, this book wasn't bad. It just wasn't as good as all the other romance that I read in July, which kind of sucks that I had to read it when I was probably like actively comparing it to all of this other really great romance that I was reading and loving. But anyway, would still recommend picking this up. Now, I have 3 more romance books that I have to talk to you guys about. I'm very, very excited. These are all 3 new favorites of mine. I am trying to stay cool, calm, and composed. We're gonna start with the one that I read most recently, which is You Deserve Each Other. And I think what I said in my Goodreads review of this book sums it up pretty well. This is an absolutely unhinged enemies to lovers romance. Now, this is the thing. Enemies to lovers as a trope, I think, usually only really works in a non-contemporary setting. And I also think when people say that they like enemies to lovers, what they actually mean is that they like rivals to lovers, or at least two love interests who oppose each other in some way. So, you know, they're separated by something. For example, the Hating Game, Josh and Lucy, they work for like two separate companies that have come together, so they kind of have this kind of work rivalry going on, right? But You Deserve Each Other is probably the best example of an actual enemies to lovers in a contemporary setting that I have ever read, because they genuinely are enemies. And I saw a TikTok saying that people people shouldn't really actually like this romance because it's a very toxic relationship, and you know, it's kind of just disgusting, and how can you like this? And I can see why people would think that, and I kind of agree, but I also kind of don't. And let me explain why. So this follows Naomi and Nicholas, who are engaged. Their wedding is fast approaching, which is a problem because they both hate each other. They hate their relationship. The story is only told from Naomi's point of view, so I don't know what Nicholas is thinking exactly. He says later on in the book that, you know, he was never wanting to end the marriage or the relationship, but at the start it is very obvious that both Naomi and Nicholas are very, very unhappy in their relationship. Right? And so this is where the enemies aspect comes in. They treat each other terribly. Like, absolutely god-awful. They are so horrible to each other. Not, like, so terrible. It's not like they physically hurt each other or anything like that, but that is the TikTok that I saw about, you know, they were saying that it's, you know, mental abuse, emotional abuse. That's what their relationship is like. And it kind of is, if I'm being honest. The reason why I don't find it so problematic is because at the very, very start of the story, we see that both Nicholas and Naomi are so stubborn and so immature. And because of this, they refuse to communicate with each other. Now, I usually hate miscommunication as a trope in romance, right? I think it's so annoying. Like, everything could just be solved if they just sat down and talked to each other. I totally get that. The miscommunication in this, though, is such an underlying, like you don't really notice it until you reach the end of the book. But that is, like, the main issue in their relationship. They don't talk to each other. And the other issue is, Nicholas comes from a super rich family, and his mum is a grade A bitch, and she is horrible to Naomi. She is a total nightmare, and she has wedged herself into their relationship. So not only is it a relationship between Nicholas and Naomi, Nicholas's mother is involved in this relationship. She has basically designed the whole wedding, she's planned the whole thing, she's taken over. Naomi hasn't been allowed to pick anything, and so at the start we see Naomi is obviously just like so over it. She's like, what is the point of this wedding when none of it is what I want? I'm not even going to enjoy it. And at this point, I don't even enjoy the man that I'm going to be getting married to, right? Like, why am I still in this relationship? And in saying that, it is so obvious that Naomi is just so unhappy with her life. I don't want to say that she is depressed because it's never said in the book, but the way that she describes her experiences in the story, like, genuinely sound exactly like a dissociative disorder. She mentions, you know, kind of not being present in her body. She mentions, you know, feeling detached. And so when I was reading this, to me, I kind of just assumed that Naomi wasn't really thriving mental health-wise. And that obviously comes to affect relationships, especially when she's feeling so alone and separate from her fiance. We also learn as the book goes on that Nicholas has very similar issues with their relationship, and this is the thing. I think this romance works so well because you so clearly see the character development and the relationship growth between them. Like, you see them grow as individuals and you see them come together and fix their relationship. I think it worked very, very well, and I think it's just a little bit too complex to just say that this is just a toxic relationship and people shouldn't be liking this story. I think that's just a bit too complex. I also think that if you believe that you are someone who likes enemies to lovers and then you read this and you see just how horribly they treat each other and you don't like that, maybe you don't actually really like enemies to lovers as much as you think. Maybe you are more of a rivals to lovers person than you realize. That's not meant to be a call out in any way, but I've never loved enemies to lovers because I've always felt that the books that people recommend as enemies to lovers are not actually enemies to lovers. They never really hate each other at the start. So it was refreshing to read a contemporary romance where they do genuinely kind of hate each other. I just thought this was like really brilliantly done, and I definitely think that if you liked The Hating Game, you could potentially like this. I don't even know what book to talk about next because I love them both so much. Oh my god, I'm gonna talk about It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This is a new release romance, and I just love this so much. Again, another romance where I think you really see some great individual character development, but also some really sweet romance relationship growth. This follows Piper, who I think is about 28. She's getting close to her 30s, and she's kind of having a bit of a crisis about it. So she kind of acts out one night, breaks into a hotel, hosts a huge party in their pool, gets arrested, and when she gets bailed out, her stepdad, who is a movie director, or so he's in the movie business, basically says, "This is the last straw. I'm sending you back to your hometown." So Piper's dad died when she was very, very young, and before he died, Piper's sister, their mum and their dad lived in this little seaside town, kind of around where Forks is. I remember there's like a part in the book where Piper mentions she only knows where this town is because she watched Twilight, and they mentioned the Pacific Northwest. I don't know American geography, so I could be entirely wrong, but it's up around where Twilight is meant to be set. Anyway, so this is kind of a test of Piper's character, kind of a test to see if she will be able to handle being sent to this tiny town in the middle of nowhere. She's cut off from her allowance. Basically, she is just this spoiled rich girl who's never had to work for anything in her life, doesn't really know what she wants to do, but this is the thing. Everyone sees Piper and they assume that because she is rich and spoiled, that she is airheaded and rude and shallow, and she is absolutely none of these things. I adored Piper so much. She is so charming and just such a lovely main character to read. And she goes to this small seaside town back where she lived when she was very, very young. She doesn't really remember it, right? And she meets this absolute DILF of a sea captain. I mean, he's not actually like a DILF, but he gives off DILF vibes. And he's this huge grump. He's a widow, so he was married and his wife died. It's a whole thing that he has to overcome. But he is just so ready to love someone, and Piper comes to this tiny town and she is so ready to be loved by someone for once in her life, because it is just so obvious that she has been just mistreated and taken for granted by everyone in her life. And they just had one of the best romances I have ever read. It was so sweet and steamy as fuck. Oh my god, this was so good. I'm pretty sure the last book I read of Tessa Bailey's last year was also a 5-star read, and this was a 5-star read. This, I'm waiting for a physical copy of this so I can just reread it over and over and over again. This is going to be a comfort romance for me. It was just so wonderful. 5 stars. And if you think I'm getting all gushy and mushy over that, wait until I talk about the last book. I read this kind of actually towards the start of July, but I had to leave it until last because I genuinely think this is one of the best romances I have ever read, and that is The Spanish Love Deception. Now, this is also kind of an enemies to lovers, but again, it's more like rivals to lovers. This follows Catalina, who at the very start of the book we see is having a crisis because she needs to find a date to take back to Spain for her sister's wedding. And she's kind of just talking about her crisis to her best friend at work when one of her co-workers overhears her conversation and offers to go with her as her date. And this so happens to be Aaron Blackford, our romance hero of this story. And listen, I really don't like to simp for fictional men. Like, not really. I enjoy reading a good romance hero, but I don't really actually like falling in love with them because I just think it's ridiculous. But oh my god, Aaron Blackford made me feel things that I don't know if I've ever felt ever before. I absolutely love him so much. One of the best, possibly the best romance heroes I've ever read in my life. But the thing is, Catalina doesn't want to take Aaron as her date. She doesn't like Aaron, and this is because years ago when he first started working at the company, she overheard him saying some not great things about her, and basically ever since then she's been holding a grudge, and I don't blame her. Honestly, I don't. I would probably be the same. I'm a petty bitch. But basically Aaron goes, listen, I'll be your date if you will happen to be my date for an event that I need to bring someone to. So it's kind of like a fake dating scenario, because Catalina's thing is she doesn't just want to bring a date. She wants to bring home a boyfriend. Obviously she doesn't have one, so she asks Aaron to be her fake boyfriend, and she really wants him to impress her parents, but she also really just mainly wants to impress her ex, who treated her terribly. So she kind of wants to prove to her family that she's fine, she's moved on from everything that happened back in Spain, she's doing okay, she's got a great new boyfriend, and she can kind of rub it in her ex's face a little bit. Except turns out Aaron is just the best guy ever, and Catalina can't help falling in love with him. Just like I couldn't help falling in love with him, and he couldn't help falling in love with Catalina because he apparently has just loved her the whole time, and he is literally just the perfect man, and they are perfect together. I will say, I almost DNF'd this book because I found the start to be the most repetitive, boring bullshit I have ever read. The first like 10-20% of this book is just Catalina going, no, I don't want to take you to the wedding, and Aaron going, well, you don't have any choice, take me, and Catalina going, no. Really, really annoying seeing this conversation go on for pages and pages and pages, and then be repeated for more pages. I found Catalina was the most annoying protagonist to read from at the start, but she gets better. She gets better. Please, if you have the same issue with me, you're bored in the first 10-20%, just skim through. Speed through the first few chapters. It's irrelevant. You don't really need to read it anyway. Wait till you get to the good stuff, which is when they start actually fake dating and spending time together and going to Spain. That's when it all is really, really, really good. Definitely don't give up on this book. It was so incredible. I couldn't stop reading this once I got past that first like 10%, and I genuinely think that the day that I read this book was one of the best days of 2021 so far, simply because this book was that great. Not to hype it up so much. If you go and read this, like, I'm not saying that this is the perfect romance ever, I'm not saying that you're going to love this, but again, if you liked The Hating Game, I keep referring things back to The Hating Game because it is just such a popular romance book, but genuinely, if you liked The Hating Game, you will almost guaranteed love this. I think that is all of the books that I have to talk about. So thank you guys so much for chatting with me about all of these books, and thank you guys so much for watching this, especially if you've made it all the way to the end. I know I just go on and on and on, but I appreciate it so much. I love you guys, and I hope you're having a really great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you guys with another video sometime soon. Bye!